Welcome into another Arrowhead Pride emergency podcast on the bye week. Pete Sweeney, the editor-in-chief of arrowheadpride.com, joined by our lead film analyst, Ron Kopp Jr. We have our podcast producer, Steve Serta, on with us, and the news of the day. No bye week is quiet in Kansas City. The news of the day is that the Chiefs go and make a big-time move for a player with a big name that's been a little underwhelming. Wide receiver Kadarius Toney coming to the Chiefs from the New York Giants in exchange for a compensatory third-round pick and a sixth-round pick in 2023. First thing I want to do here on the emergency podcast, and go to you, Steve, because you're my raw reaction guy. You just talked about before we got on how you were heading to lunch on this beautiful bye week Thursday, and you had to turn your ass around. So what was your immediate reaction to this deal, Toney to the Chiefs?
I was just like, this damn team. No time off is safe right now over the Chiefs bye. No, I think it is an exciting move and it's an intriguing move. Toney is a player that kind of worries me a little bit because he's had problems staying on the field because of injuries. And then it seems like there's been a lot of kind of discourse back and forth with the regime that drafted him and the new regime, and like him not being able to like even get on the field at times when he is healthy. And so he's shown plenty of upside when he is healthy, and that's a very limited sample size at this point. But I do think he offers the Chiefs something that they need, and that's a guy who can separate from man coverage. And that's something that we've seen them struggle a little bit with this season, just with the bodies that they have at wide receiver. And he's a young player who's on his rookie deal. So it's a cost-effective move. And we knew the Chiefs weren't going to keep all 12 of those draft picks. So at the end of the day, if it works out, Brett Veach is going to look really smart. And if it doesn't, then they'll just move on from him after his rookie contract.
Ron, I know after the last 20 or 30 minutes, you've watched some film on Toney, and I do want to get to that. But first, what is your raw reaction to the deal?
Yeah, when I first saw the compensation, the conditional third for someone that, has sort of just laid out, he struggled to stay on the field, someone we haven't seen really at all this year, and has only really had one big game in his entire career after being the first round pick last year. The 10 catches, 189 yards he had against Dallas, that it is impressive highlights, and it is what makes me excited and what makes this move, one that I do think it is a little hard to see exactly how he comes in right away and has any sort of a voluminous role. I think, you have some spot roles and specific plays, quick, those RPO slants they run, that's an easy thing for him to do, quick screens, out in the flat, get him in space and utilize that ability. I see that, but it does kind of feel like more of a long-term thing. That's why maybe the compensation was that high, because you do have a guy for the next 2 to 3 years, depending on that fifth-year option, because of the first-round draft pick. So I don't know. I like the swing. Even if it doesn't amount to much right away, it's a good swing for Veach, and it's one that I'm surprised we didn't see coming. Veach, former first-round pick. This is his kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when I first saw this, I felt like, what the hell? Because I think we had all subscribed to the fact that, when you see Quinn go to the Eagles, not that it has anything to do with receivers necessarily, but I just think we wrote off the idea of the Chiefs trading for a big name. I would consider a former 20th overall pick in the first round last year a big name. Now, it's been disappointing this past year and a half, and I think as you're seeing some of the reviews from fans come in, this is where the negative fans are leaning on. Like, why are you I've seen the joke a lot already. Why are they trading for a glass receiver? I think that those people that are disappointed with the move of sending a 3-6 for Toney, think that the Chiefs are now out on the OBJ sweepstakes, which is not the case. And I'll tell you why. And that's B, is like, this is a movement. And because it's a big name, people are like, well, whose snaps is he going to take? I don't know how much about 2022 this is about. Like, that's where I think you can start to see the upside here. And I did tweet out a thread, and I want to go through some of the points here. Generally, I think this is a low risk, high upside move, given the fact that the receiver could potentially be with the Chiefs if he does get healthy through 2025. You have that 5th-year option now as well. So this is a player that's going to be with the Chiefs for a long time. And it's for a low salary. I mean, you're not really paying him all that much. And if you don't want the 50-year option, you don't want the 50-year option. The cap number never hits above $3 million. And the Chiefs really like this guy. From what I have heard and talking to people that are inside the building, they were very, very high on him ahead of last year's NFL draft. And because of COVID and because of, I believe it was an oblique strain and a hamstring, I mean, Toney has just not been able to stay on the field. I mean, how often do the Chiefs say, we trust Rick Burkholder, we trust his training staff? And so I think there's going to be a let's get him right process. Like, he hasn't played in a while. I don't think they're going to necessarily rush him on the field. And if you're worried about the future, well, the Chiefs still have 8 picks in the 2023 NFL draft. That includes a first rounder, second rounder, third rounder, 2 fourth rounders. They think they may end up getting 2 compensatory picks as well. So it could still be 10 picks. And if you look at the wide receivers under contract for 2023, listen to these names: Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, Justin Ross, and now Toney. There's no guarantees that Juju or Mecole Hardman are necessarily going to be here next year. And then, as you were saying, Ron, I think it does fall under the Veach special. And I used an example of Sammy Watkins. Now, it's not a 1-for-1. Sammy Watkins, at the time of his signing, had done things in the NFL and really showed that he could be that guy on the big stage. But I think the energy there is the same, in the idea that I believe Brett Veach and the personnel staff with the Chiefs identified that Toney isn't a blue chip player right now. He hasn't been on the field, but he could be, right? He's 6 feet. He runs a sub 4.4, 4.39 at the Florida Pro Day. And I think they're taking a not so much compensation back to the Giants' chance to go get him. When you talk about a compensatory 3rd round pick, you're actually talking about a 4th round pick in a sense. It's not a real 3rd rounder. When you look at in the course of history, those picks happen after the round. And so I feel okay about it. I don't think it's a big deal for 2022. I don't think this is a move for 2022. I think this is a move for the future, which is why you can be comfortable in knowing that the Chiefs are still going to be involved in what will be the OBJ sweepstakes. We're starting to find out that he's not going to be ready till early December. So I expect that to pick up in a week or two after the bye week, certainly. So, Steve, I'll go back to you before we go to Ron for the film analysis. Hearing all that, how do you feel about the move?
Well, I think what you said there about the Chiefs training staff is a really important component to all of this, because he is a player who's shown legit dynamic upside here in the NFL, but he's really struggled to stay on the field. And the Chiefs have one of the best training staffs in football. Like, we talk about it every single year. And so they have to go to those guys and say, can we keep him healthy and keep him on the field and make sure he's able to play for us? And Rick Burkholder and that staff were like, yeah, like we'll get him right, because we know that some of these NFL training staffs aren't necessarily the best teams in football. And
Chargers. Cough.
Yeah, when trying to keep their guys healthy.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think that's a really important component here. I think that he is going to have an opportunity to return punts right away and contribute there, because I don't think there was a chance the Chiefs were going to come out of this bye week with Sky Moore as their punt returner moving forward, just based on what we've seen from him so far this year. But yeah, I hadn't even really thought about the Justin Ross component of it. If he comes back and is healthy and looks like that player that he was in college when he was at his peak, and I still think that Sky Moore's got a ton of upside, all of a sudden you're talking about this wide receiver core that was kind of going through an overhaul this offseason. And all of a sudden they're young again. They're young and they all have a bunch of upside if they're healthy, which is a big if. But man, Patrick Mahomes is making it work with a lot of different people this season. And you give him these young, inexpensive playmakers, and it gives the Chiefs the ability to go out and continue to build the roster in other places. Plus, they've got this defensive youth that they're building now. And it's hard not to feel good about where the Chiefs are going here in the near future and over the next couple of years.
I do have to, go with the one negative point here, and that's like the Giants have had a lot of receiver issues, right? Sometimes you look back at the teams that are trading the player, and I think we especially do that here in Kansas City, as we have been dealing with this Orlando Brown Jr. situation. It's like, what did that team maybe know that the Chiefs didn't know? And so there's always that factor, but like much unlike the Orlando Brown deal, I mean, it's just not as much compensation. I talked about the comp 3 and the 6. So that's where it becomes low risk. And this does fit under, I think, the guys of the Veach special. It's just we don't see this recent of a first rounder usually come to Kansas City, where I think this is a different type of Veach special because we just don't know as much, I think, about this player. And that could be a good thing, because usually when we are talking about, again, I'm going to say it one more time, the Veach special, it's a player that didn't really work out in another place, but they had a real opportunity to be healthy on the field. It's not good that he's been sort of sickly / unhealthy for a year and a half, but I think where you can look into the positive of that is, to me, it's still a hidden door in a way. And Ron, you jumped into the film. There have been times when he really has flashed as being, as they say, that dude in the NFL.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the low 40 time that he had, the sub 4.4. I mean, he was a first round pick for a reason.
Right.
The Giants, a lot of people tried to clown the Giants for taking him there, but it came out later that they took him there because they felt like a lot of other teams were trying to get him, and the Chiefs could have been one, obviously, later in that first round. So that is the thing with him. And I do want to make something clear, though. I think it's easy to say, or you see a guy, that's fast and electric in the open field and think, okay, does this mean something for McCole Hardman's role in the offense? Well, I think they are pretty, they're different players. It's not very close and similarity wise, in my opinion. Hardman is very good at the straight ahead speed stuff, and that's why he's really good on those jet sweeps and obviously on the vertical routes when he does get loose going down the field. Toney does have that low 40 speed, but he's not the same kind of vertical threat. He's not a guy that's going to just be, straight ahead speed, building momentum and speed as he goes. He's more of a short burst, quick area kind of guy. And that's where I think, maybe some of the quick screen stuff, you mentioned screen passes, as a way to maybe get the ball in his hands, that could take away from what McCole does a little bit. But in terms of the jet sweeps, again, being that vertical presence, maybe even being a decoy down the field, I think Hardman's more, fits that role still. And that's what he's been doing. So I think you'll see more of that. But the underneath stuff is where I think Toney can contribute, on a quick slant. I do think he can create that separation that, and they run those RPO slants we've seen Juju succeed on recently. They've tried to get Sky Moore going on those. And that's where you maybe think, okay. And this was another thought I had maybe right away, is like, is this a response to maybe Sky not coming along as quick as they want? I think I push back on that, my own initial thought, just because I don't think, I don't think just because Moore's not picking it up right now, is Toney supposed to come in and pick it up any quicker? So that's where I don't think it necessarily impacts McCole's role or necessarily Sky's. I mean, maybe Toney eats into Sky's limited snaps a little more, again, on those quick throws, on those slants, on those quick screens that we've seen, like the end of the Raiders game, if we remember. Sky got involved on a couple quick screens. So I think right now I'm not sure exactly how it impacts the rest of the offensive players. I think he'll just get sprinkled in as the season goes. And the DeAnthony Thomas packages, I think he's a better player than DeAnthony Thomas. But those back in the day where you'd think all of a sudden DeAnthony Thomas is getting a quick screen out of nowhere, and you'd like, where did that come from? I think that could maybe be how he gets involved right away. But I agree with Serta. I do think he could be the punt returner right away. I don't see why not, right? That's just a way to get him. And he's had experience doing it, obviously more than Sky Moore, someone who didn't even do it in college. So that's why I think maybe the best, the quickest way we could see him contribute is in special teams.
Yeah, I thought of something while you were talking, Ron, and I tend to agree. I don't know how much it's going to eat into McCole's role. However, it could. Could you imagine being McCole Hardman right now?
Yeah,
yeah. Drafted in the second round by the Chiefs, then you think Tyreek Hill may not play all year, and he gets no games, suspended. So your role is kind of not going to be, at least with the offense, right away. Then you watch Tyreek Hill become, let's be honest. We can be honest here, right? This is just us three talking. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL. Meanwhile, Travis Kelce's on the team eating your targets. You're like, okay, I just got to stay the path. Got to play my role. Eventually, one of these guys will leave. Hill leaves via trade, and the Chiefs bring in Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, an established deep threat and a pretty good possession receiver. So again, your snaps and your touches are limited. Then what do? You're like, okay, I'm just going to try to stay positive. I'm going to keep working. You just have the best game of your career. I'm going to have the best game of my career. I'm going to score 3 touchdowns. No one in NFL history has played the wide receiver position has ever had 2 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown in the game. And then what do the Chiefs do? They go trade for another receiver that could eat into your role. I mean, the ability for this man to stay positive has been, I think, just very impressive in my mind. I want to go to the fan reaction of this deal. We put up a poll so far at Arrowhead Pride with the announcement of the trade for Kadarius Toney. And usually it takes about 1,000 votes for the vote to not move as much. That usually gives us a good glimpse into what the Chiefs fans are thinking about it. So right now we have 2,400 votes, and it's a 71% approval rate, 29% non-approval rate. So about 3/4 of Chiefs fans are happy about this thing, and a fourth are not that happy. And not to push back on the fans that are unhappy, because not every fan is going to like every single move, but I just don't think there's a ton of risk involved, just because the Chiefs should still have about 8 to 10 picks in the NFL draft. So I think that's where I would push back. Does 29% surprise you, Steve, of Chiefs fans not being thrilled about this?
No, because I do think there's worry about it, right? And because of the injury issues and things like that.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. There was there an attitude issue in New York with Toney?
So that I think that's kind of the problem too, is that, and I don't even blame him for Joe Judge and dealing with that coaching staff. I probably wouldn't want to play for that guy either.
Look at Danny Dimes right now. I think everybody gets a pass with Joe Judge. Yeah.
But there was like rumblings of like questioning his work ethic and how much he was really invested in picking up the playbook and, going through film and doing all the things that you need to do at the NFL level to succeed and become like a premier kind of player. And that was last year with Joe Judge, which we know that was one of the worst coaching staffs in NFL history. Like, they were just awful, awful. And this year, Brian Daboll looks like he has put together a really good staff and they're having a really good season, but it never felt like Kadarius Toney was even a part of their plan. So that worries me. But again, I think it comes back to, you're taking a bet on the culture of your locker room, on the leadership of Patrick Mahomes and the leadership of Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and the guys that are already established winners in this locker room, and saying, we'll get him up to speed. We'll make him a better NFL wide receiver, and we will get the most out of him. And if you don't, it didn't really cost you that much. So hopefully it works out. But the Chiefs are just betting on their situation and their circumstances here to get the most out of a player who's had an up and down NFL career in only a year and a half.
Yeah, I'm looking at Twitter right now, and there are 3 tweets I want to talk about before we wrap this thing up here. Kadarius Toney tweeted a minute ago, all caps, Chiefs Kingdom baby, red and yellow heart, prayer emoji. Thank you, God. So my man wanted out of New York and by extension New Jersey, which is telling. I mean, this is a team that's actually taking the league by storm right now. Toney has been hurt; he hasn't had a role, and so I think that obviously happy to get out of that situation. Patrick Mahomes tweeted out a GIF of The Rock smiling, so he approves. Which we only have the 71% Arrowhead Pride approval, but Mahomes, it seems like it's 100% approval. One thing that you should know about Mahomes, this is just a worthy reminder in these situations, is Veach and Pat talk a lot. Like, these deals don't happen unless Pat also is on board and likes the player. Like, they're very in sync. That's a good thing that we have seen other teams, Seattle, Green Bay, etc., don't have, and so that's always smart to remember here. And then the third tweet I just wanted to read to you guys, and this came from Jordan Schultz, who has really broken a lot of stories recently. I just feel like I see his name popping up more and more with some of these stories. He broke the Toney news today. Definitely worth noting that the Chiefs loved Toney coming out of the draft. We mentioned that. Felt like he is super electric talent that Mahomes would maximize. That speed next to Mecole Hardman is yet another layer for DC's to scheme for. And Schultz added that there's a chance Toney can play next weekend. And as I was saying, again, I don't know if that'll be true. I don't know if that'll come to pass. I think the Chiefs will be smart here. Trent McDuffie, I watched look pretty good on the field for 2 weeks, and then he didn't play in back-to-back games. Like, this is that type of player. They don't need him right away. But, man, if you can get him 100% by the end of the year, and now he's suddenly I think it would be fair to call, right, Ron, like your 4th receiver behind, because Juju, MVS, Hardman, and then I would put Toney ahead of Moore. And maybe, depend. Well, I guess we still have to see with Moore, but certainly it seems like he would touch the ball before Justin Watson. So you have a stronger wide receiver room depth wise. And again, if he's 100%, you got to feel pretty good about the Chiefs' chances in the playoffs and maximizing all these guys on the field, right, Ron?
Yeah, well, I do think it's interesting to talk a little bit about the Sky Moore part of this because, I mean, if Sky Moore is doing the things that maybe some of us maybe thought he could do in training camp, or even the people that were excited coming out of the draft, I mean, if he was doing those at a more consistent basis, do they make this move, right? I do think there is maybe a little something to, okay, we're not maybe getting that same just kind of lightning in a bottle, okay, limited, maybe make a big play out of a quick pass kind of roll from Sky. I think they've tried, and they have kind of forced the ball a little bit to him, in my opinion, over the last couple of weeks, especially Mahomes, in my opinion. I think there's times where he's really looking at Sky, really trying to get him the ball, even if he's thrown it or not thrown it. And so is there something to, I'm kind of asking the question because, I think it's a little early to say, okay, Sky's not catching on. Let's try to find someone else can do what he's doing. So that's where I don't maybe buy into this as hard. But at the same time, if Sky was doing those things that we kind of think he could, do they even feel the need to make this move? We have this rookie receiver that already does this. So that's where, I do think there maybe is something interesting to that. But then at the same time, the long-term point is true, right? Like that this could just be a long-term play. But I think we'll see it right out the gate. Jordan Schultz report that he could play right away is pretty, that's something that makes me kind of think, I'm curious to see, if does he come out and take Sky's, snaps in the offense. So I don't know. That's probably the most interesting thing to me coming out of this that I want to see when the games start back.
Well, as long as he's healthy, I mean, you've seen the opposing defenses have played a lot of man coverage against the Chiefs. It's just, I think it's another threat of like maybe trying to prevent them from doing that as much as they have, which at times this year we've seen the Chiefs struggle with. So we shall see what happens now. Again, I think the Chiefs will still be involved in those OBJ sweepstakes, and we will see how it plays out. But I think putting on a bow on this, I've said it a few times, I just think it's another beach special, another low risk, high reward deal, and you hope for Chiefs fans and readers of Arrowhead Pride that it's more the high upside than a risky thing that fizzles out that we've seen before, with some of these moves that the Chiefs have made. All right, so thank you to our lead analyst, Ron Kopp. Thank you to our Arrowhead Pride podcast producer, Steven Serta. I'm Pete Sweeney. This has been another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Emergency Podcast.